Hi, I'm Susan Kennedy of Pretty Peaceful, and today I'm out here in the beautiful San Juan Mountains of Southwest Colorado to show you the More The Merrier blanket pattern. And this is an older pattern of mine from like 2017 or 2018, but I never made a video for it. And I've made a bunch of them. So I figured I'd show you how to make this blanket. This is the free pattern. You can find it in many places, Ravelry.com, prettypeaceful.com, my website. It's a free download there. Lovecrafts.com, and also you can find it on Facebook in our Facebook group, Pretty Peaceful People. Look in the files section and you'll see it in there. So the blanket on the photo here, that was a really huge one that I made. I don't have it anymore. I gave it to my friend Jenny in Louisville. Shout out Jenny. This one was 9 cakes of mandala yarn. So this is the yarn I'm using for this pattern, Lion Brand Mandala. Each cake is about 590 yards or 540 meters. So this big one here that was big enough to fit a double or full-size bed took 9 cakes, and it's really huge, of mandala. And the pattern, if you download it, you'll see that it's got, the written crochet pattern here. It's got instructions on how to start the row. And make your first stitch, and then also how to end the row, because that's usually where things go wrong, right? So exactly where to go to start to end the row. It's also got a little tutorial for how to join the cakes when one cake runs out and you want to add the next one. I use the Russian join method. And then the last page of the pattern here is a chart, and it shows you depending on how many mandala cakes you have, anywhere from 1 to 12 cakes of mandala, it'll tell you how much yarn it'll take, the finished size in inches and centimeters, and then how many chains to start your first row with, like row 1, and then how many rows to do overall to get to that size. So I'll show you a couple of the different sizes here. This one is pretty big, not as big as that first one I made. This is 6 cakes of Lion Brand Mandala. It's a big blanket. It is a big blanket, even with 6 cakes. And the stitch here is double crochet between the stitches. So it's kind of a very simple mesh. It creates a woven look, and it really helps the colors blend together and make really cool stripes. With the 6 cakes here, the stripes are a little wider than the 9 cake version that I showed you. The smaller the blankets go, you'll see the stripes get a little bit wider. So if you want really skinny stripes, make a big one. And you can see that we have color changes in the middle of the row, and that's okay. It all blends in to just make like a really stunning blanket. So we're going with the flow of color changes here. So on this one, I started at the bottom with 1 cake of Wizard, and then 1 cake of Andorian, then 1 cake of Gnome, and I cut out the really dusty gray purple color in the gnome, and then there's like a kind of dull green color in there. I cut those both out because I don't want to bring the vibe down, but other than that, I'm not controlling the colors as far as where the color starts and stops. Then I have a cake of Kraken. I really love that one. And then we have Gnome, and at the top is Thunderbird, and I didn't need the brown of the Thunderbird. I didn't get to quite use that whole cake to get to the size I wanted in the 6 cake version here. This next one, I don't know how I feel about it, the color combo. You tell me what you think about this one. This one is 4 cakes of mandala. So it's still pretty big. It is, let's see, 1 cake of Diagon Alley at the bottom here. That's a Mandala Baby color, and then this one's Unicorn Cloud. And then this is Elf, and the last one is Fairy, and I believe Elf and Fairy have both been discontinued. But I wanted to just show you the 4 cake size. I also made one with 3 cakes, with 2 cakes of Wood Nymph and 1 cake of Unicorn. You can see pictures of that one on Ravelry. These are all very wrinkly because they were in my storage boxes. Don't mind the wrinkles. And then this one's a little different. For this one, I used less than 2 cakes of Lion Brand Mandala and Gnome, but I mixed it with a solid color And the solid I used here is Bernat Baby Sport in baby gray. So I just did a kind of a gradient stripe here where I'm doing like 1 row of gray, 2 rows of gray, 3 rows of gray, 4 rows of gray, 5 rows, or this is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rows in the middle there. And I start with 8 rows of mandala here, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, maybe just 4, 3, 2. Anyway, you get the idea. You don't have to use Lion Brand Mandala. You can use any scraps as long as they're the same weight. They don't have to be the same brand, and mix and match here. And you can see how that turns out and try to make it a mirror image if you want to, cut the yarn and control the colors. You can make whatever you want with this stitch. And then this one here is just 2 cakes of mandala. Again, very wrinkly. But this is a good baby blanket size, even if you just have 2 cakes. And you see it's fairly light, like you can see the light through it. That's one of the things I love about this stitch. It's like double crochet, so it's fast. But it's double crochet between the stitches instead of double crochet into the top of the stitches. So it goes fast because you have a bigger hole to aim to put your hook in. So for this one, I used 1 cake of Chimera here and 1 cake of Banshee. On the, actually Sandman, sorry, this is Sandman on the bottom. And you can see the stripes are a lot wider when you only have 2 cakes. And you can make one with only 1 cake, it is smaller, but for a throw, I would go with at least 3 cakes, up to about 6 cakes, or if you want a bedspread, that would be like 7 cakes and up. But you can make a little baby blanket with just, 2 cakes. So I'm going to show you how to crochet this. Like I said, the photo tutorial is in the pattern PDF that you can download, but I'll show you how to get started. And this time I'm going to make a neutral one, which I don't do a ton of. And I've got 6 cakes of kind of neutral colors here. We have Sphinx, that is one of the kind of classic mandala colors. This is Groot, which, it looks like this in the cake, but it works up really beautifully, and I ended up using this one a lot. Then this one is Centaur. Love that beautiful Southwestern. I use this one a lot too. This one is Warlock, another one of the kind of classic mandala colors. And my last 2 here are Dragon. I also love that one. And this one is Banshee. It's one of the newer ones here. So my plan for this is because about half of the cakes have a little turquoise in them. I'm going to alternate a more neutral cake, a turquoise, a more neutral cake, and then another turquoise. And I can't hold them all, but I'm going to go neutral, turquoise, kind of mix up the cakes to try to evenly distribute the turquoise stripes throughout the blanket. And other than that, I'm just going to let the colors go and go with the flow. And yeah, let's go inside. I'll show you how to make it. Okay, so the More The Merrier crochet pattern. You can find this printed PDF on Ravelry with the photo tutorial here. And the stitch we're looking at is DC between the stitches. So we're making double crochet stitches in US terms, but instead of stitching into the top of each stitch, we're stitching into the spaces between each double crochet stitch. So for this one, I am using Lion Brand Mandala yarn. This is a DK weight yarn, and it recommends a 5mm hook, but I am going to go down by 1mm hook size. So I'm going to be using my G 4mm hook. This is a Clover Amur hook. So whatever yarn you're using, go down 1mm hook size or at least 0.5mm hook size. Otherwise it gets kind of lacy with big holes. Obviously it's up to you, but I like more of a tight stitch here. I think it still has a good drape with a 4mm hook. So you can use any yarn you want. If you're using a worsted weight yarn, and we're going to go to the last page of the pattern and look at the chart here. If you want to make a finished blanket that is 36 by 48, then you'll start here with 117 stitches if you're using DK weight yarn. If you're using bigger yarn and a bigger hook, you might want to go down to the next smaller size and just start with 97 chains in the row. So this chart here on the last page of the pattern, this is designed for DK weight yarn and a 4mm hook. And if you use larger yarn or larger hook, you're going to need a little bit less yarn to get to the finished size. And you may want to go down one size when you're choosing how many chains to start with. So I'm making a blanket with 6 mandala cakes. So I'm going to start with 169 stitches in my first row, 169 chains. And that will create one row of double crochet after row 1 that has 167 stitches, 167 double crochet stitches. And then I'm going to end up doing 188 rows across my 6 cakes of mandala. So let's get started. Okay, I'm going to start with making a slip knot and putting my yarn on the hook, and you can do that however you like. And I'm going to make my chains. So if you're making a really tiny blanket with just 1 cake, you might only do 78 chains. And if you're making a giant blanket with 12 cakes, you might want to do 247 chains. But I'm going to start with 169. So I'm just yarning over, pulling through to make each chain. And you don't want to do this too tight because then that makes a really tight first row of your blanket. And it's going to seem really tiny, so try to chain gently. And of course, if you know how to do the foundation double crochet method, go ahead and use that. Make a nice even first row. I've made a few videos showing how to do that. I know my Pretty Peaceful Poncho video shows how to do that. So we'll make our row of chains, however long you want to make it. And then we're going to double crochet into the 3rd chain from the hook. So I've got 1 chain, 2 chains, 3 chains. I'm going to double crochet into this chain. And those first 2 chains, this will count as our first double crochet here. And here's our second double crochet. And we're just going to double crochet into each chain across. So in row 1, we're going to have 2 stitches less than whatever number you chained because we skipped those first 2. So you'll just double crochet in each chain across. This is just a regular row of double crochet. Make it as wide as you want. And I'm just doing a little sample here because 169 or 167 double crochets in a row will take forever. So I'm just gonna do a little sample here and show you how to get started. And it's really just a 1 row repeat here. So once I show you row 2 and row 3, then you'll be on your way and ready to roll. And it's very simple. It's a really simple stitch here. If you want this blanket to go even faster, you can check out a video I made with this same stitch, but holding the yarn doubled. And that one is called Life's Not a Race, that pattern. So you can find the free pattern on Ravelry and also a video on YouTube for how to make that blanket. It goes so fast. It's called Life's Not a Race, but that's like one of the fastest blankets you can make. So I'm just going to double crochet into each chain all the way to the end here. And I've got my last one. We're going to turn our work after each row. And we're going to start the next row. And you can start this with a chain 3. Or you can do a chainless starting double crochet stitch, which I also show how to do in that Pretty Peaceful Poncho video if you haven't seen that yet. Now we're going to look at the spaces between our stitches. These spaces, that is where we're going to crochet. So normally, in a normal double crochet, you'd go into these little top loops at the top of the stitch, but we're not going to do that this time. We're going into this big space that's in between the stitches. So we're going to yarn over and put the hook into that big space between those 2 crochet stitches, and then just double crochet as usual. Now we're going to go into that next space between the stitches, double crochet into that one. Next one, and we're just going to continue along double crocheting into the spaces between the stitches instead of under the top 2 loops of a stitch like you normally double crochet. So this first row is a little slow. You know, the first row is always a little slow, but once you get going and these spaces will open up, it'll be really obvious where to put your hook. But for now in this first row, you can kind of just pull it apart and see. You're stitching in between the two columns of those double crochets from the row 1. All along the row until we get to the last space. Here's our space between two double crochets. And then it's always a little tricky when we're starting. I have one more space between the double crochets. And then this last space here, that is really the space between the chain 3 and our first double crochet stitch. We're not going to crochet into the last space, and instead we're going to crochet into the top of the chain 3 or the chainless starting double crochet if you chose that option. So that's how we end the row, and that is what's going to keep our edges straight. We're not going to crochet into the last space. Instead, we're going to crochet into the top of the chain 3 that started the previous row. So let's turn our work and we'll chain 3 again, or chainless starting double crochet. Then we're going to crochet into that very first space, and each space across. We're going in between the stitches, crocheting into these spaces. And after a couple of rows, you'll see it kind of open up. The mesh will open up a little bit more, and it'll be easier to see where to put your stitches. The most common mistake on this blanket, and really all double crochet blankets, is missing that last stitch, missing that chain 3, because it is a little bit smaller. And it is kind of hard to find sometimes, but just make sure you're paying attention at the start and the end of the row. Crocheting into that very first space between the stitches, and then skipping the last space and instead crocheting into the last DC instead, top of the chain 3. So we got one more space to crochet into, and then this last space here, that's the space between our chain 3 and our first double crochet of the row. We're not going to crochet into that space, and instead we're just going to crochet into the top of the chain 3. Keep that nice straight edge going. And that is it. We're just going to keep going. Chain 3 or chainless starting double crochet, and go into that very first space, and each space across, skip the last space and instead crochet into the last stitch itself, the top of the stitch, the top of the chain 3 that started your row, the previous row. You guys hear that thunder? It's monsoon season here in Southwest Colorado. And we sure do need it because it's really dry here. So I'll just show you one more time what that end of the row looks like. You kind of have to pull it apart and check how many spaces you have left to crochet into sometimes. So here's my last space to crochet into. And then here's the very last space between the chain 3 and the double crochet. We're going to skip that space, and instead we're just going to crochet into the top of the chain 3. So that is it. You're starting to get this little mesh pattern here, and obviously your rows will be much longer. I hope you have fun with the More the Merrier, and thank you for watching. I appreciate your support. Bye.